placed the sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Now I think in this part of Mark's Gospel we can see Jesus is dealing with the earthly church, with his church, the church that we are part of, the church here on earth. See, we can consider the boat as the church because it's Jesus' boat with the presence of the apostles in the boat. Of course, here in the earthly church, the presence of the apostle and Jesus is represented by his teachings, his word, the readings of his word, the scriptures in the New Testament. And so the situation that we come face to face here in this story of Jesus praying up on the mountain and these apostles striving and struggling in the middle of the sea in the boat is really a type, an example of how Jesus relates to us, his earthly church. So I think there are a number of things. There are 4 things that I gather that we can learn here from Jesus, the way Jesus deals with us in the earthly church. The first thing is that you see, Jesus made them get into the boat. Verse 45, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat. So whatever way in which you came to Jesus' earthly church, it was Jesus who moves in your hearts and in circumstances so that you get into the earthly church. You see, the word here, the word he made his disciples get into the boat, is the same word that is used of Paul. You know, when Paul was persecuting the church and he was forcing people against their will, for them to say something against Jesus, to blaspheme against Jesus, it's the same word. It's a compulsion with force. I think we're so used to the Jesus who's so tender and mild that, we are told by people that Jesus is not free to force us into salvation. It is us who made the choice to come to know Jesus. I don't think that is the picture of God in the Bible. See, we are not free. We are slaves to sin. Even when you think you are free, even when you think, I just made a free decision to come to church today. No, it was under the compulsion of the God who is sovereign over all things. We have no free will. Let me say that again. We have no free will. Well, but you say, well, what about my free will? I get up in the morning and I decide to brush my teeth. We've lost the free will in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve decided to sin against God. We have the will, but it's not free. Our will is bonded to sin. And so it should be a matter of you humbling yourself every time and thanking God for the fact that we are in church, for the fact that you can listen to his word, that you want to come and you willingly come to sit here and listen to his word, because it's all of God. Without God, he can block you, he can blind you, he can prevent you, he can do all kinds of things to prevent you, to avoid you from getting to know the truth of God. But he made you, he made me, he compels us against our will, so to speak, and let me dare to say that because it is. It was against our will, because given to your will and to my will, we will be lost forever. The apostle says that we are dead in our sins. And unless Jesus, through his grace, compelled us or made us get into the boat, into his church, his earthly church, we will never be able to do it. Secondly, notice that it's also Jesus who sets the destiny of the journey. Once again, we saw last week, it was Jesus who said, let's come with me and have some times for ourselves to rest. That's in chapter 6, verse 31. And here Jesus is we're told, said to them, get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida. Now, if you understand the Sea of Galilee, if you imagine you're looking at the Sea of Galilee, they were on this side, Bethsaida is here. They end up somewhere down here in Gennesaret, right? So you see that Bethsaida, we're told in John's Gospel, was the home of Peter and Andrew and Philip. So 3 of his 12 apostles came from Bethsaida. And I take it maybe it was home. Jesus said, no, go there, because he would expect, the Bethsaidans to receive them, to welcome them, and he was hoping perhaps for them to have a bit of rest in there, but they didn't go there. They end up in Gennesaret almost on the other end of the Sea of Galilee. However, whether it's Bethsaida or Gennesaret or wherever it may be, where Jesus is taking his church, he is taking them to have rest with him, as he promised his disciples in 6:31, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. He is like the Shekinah, like the clouds in the wilderness. He is looking, he is leading, he is guiding his church. He is taking them to be at rest with him. And that is the destiny that Jesus is taking us. Remember in Hebrews chapter 3. Hebrews chapter 3, we are given a strong warning against being unbelievers in terms of the news of God's rest. See, the warning is because the whole generation who came from Egypt, about 1.5 million of them, they all died in the wilderness because they did not believe the promise of rest. They did not believe that God was taking them from Egypt into his rest. They refused to believe that. They kept on complaining to Moses, why did you bring us here? We should have died in Egypt with the cucumbers and melons and meat and fish. They kept on wanting to go back, to return to Egypt. But the Lord was finding rest for his people, just as Jesus is looking for rest with him for his people and himself. And it is the destiny of his church. The warning is given in Psalm 95. Today, do not harden your hearts. You see, that's the warning. That people like you and me, people like those who were rescued from Egypt, could harden their hearts and therefore miss out on this promised rest, because they refuse to believe. Thirdly, you can see that Jesus comes to the assistance of his people. And he does it by going up to the mountainside to pray. He assists us by praying for us. And this is what Jesus is doing right now for us at the right hand of the Father. See? So where is Jesus? Jesus is in heaven, right? Well, what about when I accept Jesus? Doesn't Jesus come into my heart? No, Jesus is at the right hand of God the Father. His Spirit, the Spirit of Jesus, comes into your heart when you receive Jesus. But Jesus remains at the right hand of God in heaven. That's what heaven is all about. Heaven is where the risen Jesus is now living with God, and the rest of those who have conquered the evil one through their testimony to Jesus Christ and through the blood of Jesus. So Jesus goes up to the mountain to pray. It's a very good observation to realize that he doesn't go down to the valley to pray. In the scriptures, mountain sides, always going up to closer to God, is where Jesus would pray. And you see here, notice the length of his prayer. Did you see that? Then you see, after leaving them, that this is the evening, right? When he said goodbye to those he fed with the bread. And then later that night, so it was almost like 12 midnight, he was still praying. And then early in the morning, we're told that shortly before dawn, to be more specific, it was roughly 3 a.m. So he's been praying from probably roughly about 6 p.m. until 3 a.m. in the morning. Friends, I think this is an example for us of the way we should have the importance of devotion to Jesus on a daily basis. I don't think Jesus kept looking at his watch. Oh, well, it's 3 hours and 4 hours. No, he wasn't going up to spend a length of time with the Father. He went up to spend a time with God, and he really enjoyed his time with his Father that he didn't realize the time. I suppose that if the disciples didn't really struggle in the middle of the sea, he would have just stayed there the whole time, because we are told in chapter 1 that he spent the whole night praying. How is your life of prayer? How is your devotion to Jesus? I think, sometimes we have times for all kinds of things, even for our physical fitness. We have time to look after our health, but we wouldn't have time to spend with Jesus. And when it comes to us reading his word, it's just, let's hurry up and get this over and done with and say our prayers and leave it on the side so that we can go off with the other important things of our daily routines. Friends, we need to have communion, a fellowship, a time set aside for Jesus. I always realize in my life, if something is important, I always have time for it. If something is important in my life, it should tell you about your priorities in life. The things that you always have time for is the things that you think are important in your life. And so don't say that you don't have time for Jesus, because we always have time for the important thing, and this should be one of the important things. But you see, when Jesus prays, you see the effect of prayer. That's the last thing I want to say here. See the effect of his prayer. Firstly, he saw it. Do you see that? We are told that he saw the disciples, verse 48, straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Well, they were struggling against the wind, right? The wind in the Greek, in the original language, is the same as the Spirit. But you see, the Lord knows our struggles. Whatever your struggle is on a daily basis, whatever as a church we're struggling with, you are not alone. God, Jesus, who is praying for us right now in heaven, he can see. See, that's how he prays for us. He can see where we are. He knows our struggles, and he prays. And we are told in Hebrews 4 that we have in him a high priest who has been tested in all our temptations. And without sin, he is able to help you and me. He is able to draw near us and to support us in our time of weaknesses. You see, this is why it's a great privilege to come to Jesus. But you see, the apostles, kind of amazing, isn't it? They didn't really expect Jesus to come to their help. They didn't expect him to come. And when Jesus was walking on the lake, they were crying out. They were so scared of him. They thought it was a ghost. Hang on, didn't you expect that this is the Lord of the universe? Well, of course not, because we're told in verse 52, they had not understood about the loaves. Do you see that? Do you see how hard-hardened the disciples were? And I think, friends, this is our call, is to bear with each other, because sometimes, it's very hard for people to come in and to believe, to hear the message, and therefore to make decisions to turn. These people, they've come through so many miracles. They've seen the casting out of the demons. They've seen the calming of the storm. They've seen the healing the sick. They've seen so many miracles, yet their hearts still hard. They didn't expect Jesus to come, but when you pray, expect to see Jesus coming in. And last of all, do you see the effect of Jesus' prayers? He walks on water. Yes, he can play the instrumental, because this is good to remind me. It's 5:2 now. Jesus walks on water. Do you know what prayer can do to us? It can lift you up off the waters. The waters, the miry waters of this life, the things that tend to weigh us down. Prayer is our help, just as it lifted Jesus out of the water. You see, Isaiah 43. Isaiah 43. Let me read this to you, and then we'll start praying. Isaiah 43. Fine, Isaiah 43. Verses 1 and 2. And I think this is what this story is meant to point to. It's meant to point to Jesus as our Redeemer. Listen, this is what God says to Isaiah. But now, this is what the Lord says. He who created you, Jacob, he who formed you, Israel, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. This is the word of the Lord. Let's start praying. The things that we start giving thanks to Jesus for making us, get into His church. Give thanks to Jesus for the fact that He has elected us by His grace to join His earthly church. Let's pray.